Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. And have another very special guest with us this afternoon. Dear friend, he's been a friend of the show for a number of years. And his expertise has always been in the court system and the judicial system, and particularly the Supreme Court. And he's got a brand new book out right now. That's right. The Agenda. How a Republican Supreme Court is reshaping America. And he even got an op-ed in the New York Times. That's pretty big. That's a big,
so, every now and then people notice you.
Congratulations.
Thank
Ian Millhiser. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. It's been, I got my shot the other day. So I feel like I have a superpower now.
That's right. It does feel like that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, this is great. Congratulations on the book. This is your stock and trade. And I think the point you're making for all of us as we think about politics and the three branches of government, what they've done is set themselves up in a situation where they don't need the other branches, right?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, the point that I make in my New York Times piece is that if you go back just 5 years, Republicans had this incredibly ambitious legislative agenda. They wanted to cut Medicaid funding in half. They wanted to turn Medicare into a voucher program, slash food, basically shred the whole American safety net. And you didn't hear really any talk of that in 2020. They don't seem to have a legislative agenda at all. And I think the reason why is because they know they don't need a legislative agenda because they can implement so much of their agenda through the judiciary. And so in this book, I talk through how they are getting the courts to dismantle voting rights, how they're getting the courts to dismantle environmental regulations, regulations of health insurers, how they're making it so that you can't sue to enforce your rights. And it's a really troubling and really potent agenda that's being pushed through the one unelected branch of government.
Yeah. Talk to us about how this was even developed. This was sort of a master plan that was hatched years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Republicans have cared about the courts for a very long time. There are more Trump judges on the Supreme Court and on the U.S. Court of Appeals, by the way, one step down from the Supreme Court, than there are Obama judges, even though Obama was president for twice as long as Donald Trump. And the reason why is because during those last 2 years, I mean, we all know about Merrick Garland, but McConnell did this for almost all of Obama's Court of Appeals nominees too. He just wouldn't confirm anyone. And so Donald Trump wound up getting all of the seats to fill all the seats that he should have got to fill in a 4-year term, plus all the seats that Obama should have got to fill during his last 2 years in office. I mean, they care about this so much because they know that if you control the courts, you can make it so that elections don't matter. I mean, look at what's going on in Georgia right now. I mean, what happened in Georgia is that for the first time in a very long time, a Democrat won the state at the presidential level, and 2 Democrats won the Senate race. And this was, these victories was driven in large part through work in the Black community in Georgia. So what did they do? They passed a bunch of laws that's intended to make it harder. I mean, it's intended to make it hard for everyone to vote, but it's intended in particular to make it harder for Black people to vote because they don't want Democrats to win future elections. Now we have something that's supposed to prevent laws that are passed to make it harder for people to vote, and specifically for Black people to vote. It's called the Voting Rights Act. But I walk through in the book how the Supreme Court has dismantled the Voting Rights Act. You probably remember the Shelby County decision, which said that there's no longer a pre-clearance regime. So states with the racist history with their elections no longer have to clear their laws to make sure that they're not discriminatory. There is a case in front of the Supreme Court right now called Brnovich that could potentially dismantle what remains of the Voting Rights Act. And without that, here's why the Voting Rights Act matters so much. In a typical election, African Americans, 80 to 90% of African Americans will vote for the Democrat, and about 60 to 70% of Latinos will vote for the Democrat. And so what Republican lawmakers have figured out is they can use race as a proxy to identify Democratic communities. So if you close down all the polling places in a black neighborhood so that black voters have to wait 6 hours to cast their ballot, you can be pretty sure that the people who aren't going to vote are going to be almost entirely Democrats.
Yeah, yeah. And at the last hearing, when Amy Coney Barrett asked the Republicans' counsel, what did he say? He said, well, we need this in order to be able to compete. They're pretty transparent.
Yeah, I mean they've grown increasingly transparent. I mean, the striking thing is like this is a really unpopular agenda being pushed in here. I have an entire chapter about something called forced arbitration, and what forced arbitration is that if you do business with anyone, including your employer, unless you're in a union, you could get an email from your employer at any minute that says, from now on, if you have any kind of grievance against us, or you have if we break the law, you're not allowed to sue us in a real court. You have to go to a privatized arbitration system that tends to favor corporate parties, and you're not allowed to bring a class action. So you can't join with other employees if you all have a common claim. And if you don't agree to these terms, you're fired. And the thing about that, I mean, the data is really clear that like, if you go to a private arbitrator, you're less likely to win if you're an individual plaintiff than if you go to a real court. And if you do win, you get less money. So the idea here is, look, I mean, like we have laws banning employment discrimination. We have laws mandating a minimum wage. We have laws requiring certain standards for employee health plans. There's all kinds of laws that employers have to comply with, regarding how they treat their workers. None of those rights mean anything if you can't sue them. Yeah. If your employer says, we don't like your race, so we're going to fire you. We don't like the fact that you're a man or a woman, so we're going to fire you, or whatever. The only way that your right not to face that discrimination means something is you can actually haul your employer into court.
Yeah, yeah. And can't do that. But the other thing you mentioned, Supreme Court appeals.
Yeah.
I want everybody to be clear. These are also lifetime appointments.
Right.
So elections happen every 2 years. These are lifetime appointments. So it makes sense. It's like they just decided that they would supersede the election process. Now, is this also happening, though, to some level? Is it not below the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals with district judges? And even in some of the states, are baby Republicans in the states doing the same thing in state courts?
Yeah, I mean, I am terrified about what judges at all levels are going to do to the Biden presidency. Biden's first day of office, the Department of Homeland Security issued a 100-day moratorium on deportations. And like the purpose of that was just so that Biden could like be in office for a while and figure out what the heck's going on with immigration before he made any changes or figured out like how he wants to prioritize immigration enforcement. And a few days after it was issued, a Trump judge down in Texas struck it down on really spurious grounds. Mm-hmm. Or like if I can go into the weeds on one case a little bit, for a while there has been in place a federal eviction moratorium. It actually comes from the CDC. The idea is that if you kick people out of their homes, they're not going to have a safe place to be where they can ensure that they won't spread coronavirus. And so it is harder to control the pandemic if people are being evicted. And there was a Trump judge in Texas who heard a challenge to this eviction moratorium. And what the Trump judge said, I mean, this is wild, is so first of all, the Constitution says that Congress is allowed to regulate commerce amongst the several states. And the way that the Supreme Court has interpreted that is to mean commerce, that's economic activity. If Congress wants to regulate the economy or economic activity, those laws will typically be upheld. If they want to do something non-economic, that's typically not going to be upheld. And so, or at least is less likely to be upheld. And this judge said that evicting someone from a home that they pay money to rent is not an economic activity. Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, I could try to explain it, but it's inexplicable.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, like all you have to be is to be a fluent English speaker. You just have to know what the word economic means to know that doesn't make much sense.
Mm-hmm.
And and yet this is what these judges are doing. And like when I do these interviews, one question that I get a lot is, well, what do you think the courts are going to do? Besides, in the book I laid out several things I'm fairly certain, but I'll get a lot of, what do you think they're going to do about like if HR1 passes? What do you think they're going to do if this law passes? And my honest answer is, I don't know. Like that's the scary thing, is that these judges are handing down decisions from so far out in right field that like I no longer feel I can predict what's going to happen.
Right. And you're seeing, as obviously is so obvious in this rash of mass shootings.
Right.
Was talking to another guest earlier, the Brady Pack, Brian Lemick, and Igor Volsky said the same thing last week. The judge made a ruling that enabled the Boulder mass shooter to go get the gun.
Right. Yeah, there was I think they struck down the I forget which court it was, but yeah, they struck down Boulder's many of their gun regulations.
Yeah, I think it was a district court. It was a district court.
Yeah.
But we know how much McConnell and Trump judges on these districts. So you mentioned that there are more Trump judges than Obama judges on the Court of Appeals. Obviously, that's true at the district court level too.
Right. Actually, I'm actually not sure about the numbers for the district court, but the reason for that is because, so there's 3 levels to the federal judiciary. District courts are like the trial judges that hear most cases the first time around. Right. They appeal to courts of appeals and then to the Supreme Court. Right. And it matters a whole lot who sits on a district court, because like district courts decide things like criminal sentences. And so if you have a judge who is inclined to be really harsh in sentencing, that matters a whole lot to the people who are being sentenced. Yeah. But for like big policy issues, if you control the people at the top of the judiciary, then you can shape policy. And so, Biden just announced his first 11 judicial nominees, and like they all, they look great. And it looks like Biden, there's a number of people who are public defenders on there. It's a very racially diverse group. It seems like a really solid group of judges who I think will do good work. But the problem is they can be overruled by Brett Kavanaugh. And, I have less confidence that Brett Kavanaugh is going to do great work.
Yeah, and it's justifiable that you would have less confidence. Seems to me there's some calculus here to determine the numbers, what it would take to offset what Republicans have done with these appointments.
Yeah,
how many nominations it would take, how many judges it would take over a certain period of time for Biden.
Right.
To reverse this. And that's probably not something that could happen overnight, right?
Oh, Republicans have a 6-3 majority on the Supreme Court. So unless Clarence Thomas decides to go pursue his dreams on Broadway, or I don't know, maybe Sam Alito dies in a tragic hot tub accident. He needs to replace 2 seats on the Supreme Court for that court to have a Democratic majority.
Of course, for the Supreme Court. I guess I was thinking more of the district and the Court of Appeals.
Right. Yeah, and the problem you have in the lower court. So, you'll notice when I was talking about the bad stuff that the lower courts are doing, I kept bringing up Texas.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that. Part of it is that the Texas Attorney General brings a lot of the lawsuits that the Republican Party wants to bring to strike down Democratic policies. But there's a lot of really kind of wacky, some were named by Trump, some were named by Bush, judges at the district level in Texas. And then a decision out of a Texas federal court will appeal to the Fifth Circuit. And the Fifth Circuit is dominated by Trump appointees. It's one, this is the court where, many years ago, they said that a capital defendant, someone who literally was being tried, for with the death penalty on the line, did not receive ineffective assistance of counsel, even though his lawyer slept through his trial. That was eventually reversed. But this is the Fifth Circuit. It's really bad. And so the Texas AG, Biden does anything, The Texas AG brings a lawsuit. They can often shop around for the judge that they want in the lower, in the district court. Then it goes up to the Fifth Circuit, and then it goes up to a 6-3 Republican Supreme Court. And so if you're Joe Biden and you're saying, well, wait a second, like, all I'm trying to do is like halt climate change by telling these power plants they've got to install a better technology, a more recent technology so that they can reduce emissions, whatever he's trying to do, all I'm saying, there's a provision of the Affordable Care Act that says that health insurers have to cover certain preventive care procedures. There's about 80 procedures that they have to cover. It's a wide range of things, from birth control to like some cancer screenings to pediatric care. There's a ton of procedures that health insurers are required to cover. And there's a lawsuit in front of a judge in Texas right now that wants to strike down all of that. Say that this whole list has to be repealed. And so if you get free birth control, or you get free pap smears, or you get free cancer screening, or you get free vision testing for your children, or whatever, all of that could potentially go away because of these Trump judges.
Oh boy. Yeah. And in terms of the Supreme Court, you're right. There doesn't seem to be, any opportunity for a vacancy to open anytime soon.
I mean, there might be, Justice Breyer is 82. And so Breyer, like a lot of people are thinking he might retire this summer. A lot of people, Biden just nominated this woman, Ketanji Brown Jackson, who is a former clerk to Justice Breyer. And a lot of people think that KBJ, as she's sometimes called, Ketanji Brown Jackson, is likely to be the Breyer replacement. The problem is that Breyer's a Democrat. And so, like, I think that Judge Jackson, if she becomes Justice Jackson, will do a good job. But, like, she doesn't get 3 votes. She's still going to be in the minority if she gets up there.
So is it not really the solution for Biden to expand the court?
I mean, if I think yes. I think that, if I was a member of Congress, I would vote to add seats to the court. The Constitution says that there shall be a Supreme Court. Doesn't say how many seats are on it. Congress can say whatever number it wants. The problem is I don't know that he has the votes. And so, like, I think that Biden is doing exactly what he should be doing right now, which is, roll out a successful vaccination campaign, get shots in everyone that we can get a shot in. I think that the stimulus bill is great. I think that the infrastructure bill is great because it's going to put money in people's pockets. It's hopefully going to reverse the trends we've seen where a lot of wealth is being concentrated at the top and a lot of people, other people can't find good jobs. I think he's doing everything he can to make people's lives better and to make sure that we have a booming economy in 2022. And if we do have a booming economy in 2022, maybe Democrats pick up seats, and then maybe they do have the votes that they need in order to add more people to the Supreme Court, and that solves this problem. The problem with that, though, is that Biden can do as great a job as he wants, but the Supreme Court's going to be working behind the scenes, not just potentially to undermine him, but to undermine democracy by doing things like dismantling the Voting Rights Act, upholding these crazy laws we're seeing in Georgia and places like that.
Yeah. And that's the risk. What would you say to viewers and listeners, Ian, about what they can do besides, of course, vote? I mean, if you vote everybody.
Yeah. Well, I mean, voting is hugely important. And one thing I will say about voting is that most of the bad laws that we've seen are designed to make voting harder, but not impossible. Mm-hmm. The idea is that if we make it hard enough, then enough Democrats won't turn out and Republicans will win. Yeah. And if something is hard, you can still do it. Like if I've got to wait in line for 3 hours to do something, I'm still going to do it if I think it is really, really important. So voting is the most important thing. And then beyond that, I think that lawmakers need to know that their constituents are frightened about what's going on in the courts.
Yeah.
Because we need to get Biden's nominees through. If the Supreme Court continues to move things in the direction it's moving in, then, adding seats to the court may need to be on the table. And that's going to be a heavy ask for lawmakers. They're going to need to know that people think it's important.
Yeah. Folks, check out the new book by our good friend Ian Millhiser, and he's been covering this topic for quite some time. He is an expert on it. So you think this piece of legislation will ultimately gut the Voting Rights Act?
Well, I think the Supreme Court is going to gut.
That's what I mean. The case. I say legislation, but this case that there's being argued now. They had the oral arguments, so they're reviewing it now, right?
Yeah, I don't know if this will be the case that gets rid of the Voting Rights Act entirely. I think it's more likely that they'll move in a few incremental steps. Okay. But they have a 6-3 majority, and they all serve for life. So they have time. And once you don't have a Voting Rights Act, again, that means that Georgia can say, we're just going to, if you live in a black neighborhood, there's only one precinct and the line is 7 hours long and no one's allowed to bring you water.
Food and water, right. And so let's game out one other scenario before we go. Congress passes the For the People Act that undercuts all of that stuff. But what you're saying is, if someone wanted to find a flaw in any piece of legislation, they've set up a judicial system that anybody can run up to that court, and they can pretty much at will reverse whatever they want to, right?
Yeah, that's the danger. I think that most provisions of the For the People Act would be very hard to strike them down. The Constitution says that Congress has the power to regulate the time, places, and manners of elections. So that's a pretty broad power. But that said, I read that judge's decision saying that evicting someone isn't an economic activity, and I don't know what planet he's on, but there's judges who are just making stuff up, and that is my fear, is that while I can't think of a good argument or really a plausible legal argument why many provisions of the For the People Act might be struck down, these guys don't need a good argument. They just need an excuse a lot of the time.
Yeah. Folks, check out the agenda, how a Republican Supreme Court is reshaping America. You need to know about this if you don't know about it already, but Ian walks us through the whole thing and the details. We got 3 branches of government. They figured out a way to get control of one. We got to do something about that. And the solution long term is for us to make voting second nature, like we did in November and like we did in January in a special election, which never happens. That's what we've got to do. Follow him also on Twitter at I Millhiser as well. Ian, congratulations again, buddy. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thanks so much for having me.
All right, indeed. Hold on for me.